Hey, I'm Gray and I'm making a scary tower defense. Now, if you see my first devlog on the game, you would know that my scary tower defense is not that scary at all. Now, some may argue this is due to the enemies, but I'd argue it's due to the immersion. You see, all the characters and turrets have a set style to them, though the checkered floor and the bland white cubes as walls take you out of this immersion. Also, it is broad daylight right now, and everyone knows you can't have a scary game if it's bright. Now, before I could go ahead and make a scary map with ominous lighting and such, I needed to add something else. Something which offers more replay value. Randomly generated maps. Now hear me out. Most tower defenses have specific maps, meaning the track is already defined before loading into the game. Now this is good for developing strategy across multiple runs, but once you beat a map under the hardest difficulty, you don't really have any incentive to play again and develop new strategies. This causes the player to not really want to play the game anymore, or at least that map. Now, of course, this can be sort of fixed by constantly adding new maps, though that is a lot of time spent making map variants, and if the user plays enough, there will still be a lack of replayability. So I made a very basic map generator. Basically, it spawns the start room, looks for exits, picks a random one, and spawns another room. Now at the beginning of this phase, it didn't look all that impressive and looked like a grid. And then I added this start room, which is where the player will spawn, as well as a generator or your base. In the first devlog, the generator was just a white sphere. Let's change that. I modeled this generator in Blender, gave it some materials, and imported it into Unreal. I made this basic start room and made it spawn the generator here when you press play. Though I wanted to make something that more matched the vibe and style of the rest of my models, so I modeled this old mansion style room with red wallpaper, stone floors, and wooden pillars. I threw this into Unreal and it didn't work, like at all. Every time I spawned in, it threw me under the map. For a little while, I had no clue why, though I eventually figured out that the auto collisions on my mesh were not matched to the interior. So I changed the collision from simple to complex, and boom, it works. So now I have a start room with a generator, but the rest of the map is so bland, and there are no enemies. So I fixed both of these issues with an end room. This room spawns the main wave of enemies. Now, the start and the end room matched a sort of vibe, but the rest still needs work. Also, I noticed the map is way too big. Even though right now I have it set to a lot of rooms, like 30, it takes the enemies so long just to get through one. So I made a new room. This is a basic 4-door room. It's a little close for a tower defense, so I'll keep that in mind for future rooms. And I scaled this room down and all the other rooms to 80% of their original size. This is a lot more appropriate in my opinion. I also added some lights since it was extremely dark before. I then had to change up the nav mesh. Right now, it generates a nav mesh once the player is spawned in. But if the player spawns in before the map is fully loaded, the AI pathing will simply not work. So, I changed the nav mesh to update constantly. This fixes another issue with turrets. If you see my first devlog, you would know that the enemies are rather stupid and just run into the turrets. This makes it extremely easy to not die as the player, because one simple turret between you and the enemy is all you need to prevent getting swarmed or dying. But now with updating pathing, the enemies are smart and path around the turret to reach the player or generator. This makes swarm situations a lot scarier for the player, as well as gives the player the ability to sort of build their own track for the enemies to follow. But there's one very important issue with this, and that is you can now break the AI pathing. If you place turrets in a way where the enemies cannot achieve their movement goals, so if there's no feasible path from them to either you or the generator, they will simply give up and stop moving. In the future, I plan to add some sort of feature where in this scenario the enemies will attempt to destroy the turret in the way if there's no other options, though for now I am focusing on the map. So after I finished importing these rooms, I read that doing complex collisions on all your rooms is very heavy on performance. So I went back into Blender, made some collision boxes, and re-imported it into Unreal. Now, it all works. Next, I made it so the enemies spawn from multiple locations. At first, I made them spawn from different locations based on the main one, though that means the enemies spawn differently depending on which way the room is facing. So instead, I opted for some scene components. Now the enemies spawn at these specified points in the end room during the game. I made the enemies spawn between spawn locations so I can increase the spawn rate of enemies without them overlapping when spawning. As I was testing the state of the map, I realized that the whole randomness of the map worked quite poorly. You see, I want a randomized map, though I don't want a confusing map. I don't want a map where the players are getting frustrated because they are lost, or because they are spending so much time looking for the enemies, or so much time walking all the way back to the base. And half of the rooms that generated have no purpose whatsoever. So my solution is to simply add rooms with fewer exits. Right now, the only room in generation is a 3-exit room, generating a lot of branches that lead to nowhere. I do still want occasional branches, but mostly a uniform track that enemies follow. So I modeled these 3 hallways in Blender, a forward, left, and right hallway. I wanted these rooms to be more open unlike the first room so that higher ranged turrets can see more potential, as well as more space to place turrets and dodge enemies. I will not be removing the old room though, because I do like the sense of claustrophobia you get when there are swarms. Though, introducing these new rooms will decrease the chance of it spawning. Now the map generation is much less confusing and much more like a track. And since my goal was not to break immersion, I needed to fix the end room blocker. Right now it's just a weird bland cube. So I modeled this door and wall that is placed wherever a room ends. I imported it in and added some more lights because it was still a little too dark. Now this map is good. Let's make it better. Normally, there's only one way the enemies come from. Since my map sort of branches out, it would be interesting to have multiple paths that the enemies come down, forcing the player to switch up their strategy throughout the game, or just plan ahead. I modeled this hallway that leads to a cave area. I imported it into Unreal and put an enemy spawner in it. Though this spawner spawns different enemies at a different wave. So at first, it is only one path of enemies, but by wave 5, there are 2. The exact numbers will likely change in the future as to when the second spawner starts, though for now I felt wave 5 was an appropriate challenge for the enemies I have currently. But unfortunately, my spawner did not work at all. And this is due to the way I made the wave spawner. The 2 spawners are separate actors with their own tracking of the enemies alive. So if 5 enemies die and there are 6 on the board, it will say the wave is over and ready to begin. Basically, once the 5 enemies die, it will say you can spawn the next wave, but there are simply still enemies coming, so it is not synced up. And when you press enter to start the next wave, the bonus wave spawner will not spawn anymore. I worked on the dual wave spawns and ended up making a wave manager. This blueprint tracks the enemies alive from both the main and the bonus spawner. I made it so that when both waves are done, you could start the next. I could end up making it separate if I wanted, but for now, I'm just going to keep it simple. And for testing purposes, I made every round have split lane enemies, which can actually be pretty difficult depending on your map generation. Though I ended up changing when the bonus wave started to, as I said before, wave 5. I spent the remainder of my time this month fixing up some map generation. There were a lot of scenarios where the map would load, but not everything would fit properly. Sometimes this was due to having 3 of the same turn all in a row. Sometimes the map would just not have any room for the end room to be placed. And sometimes the map is one massive hallway, and there isn't another area for the end to be placed. So the first thing that I did to fix some poor generation is make a backup room. This backup room stores the data of the last placed room. This backup room can be deleted if the current room fails 6 or more times. This will lead to situations where if the map loops itself or the map spawns in a way where the end room doesn't fit, it will figure itself out. Though, this doesn't fix more complex points when the map doesn't work, and it doesn't fix the long haul bug. So I added something where if the map somehow only has one exit by the time we are in the 3rd room, it will spawn a room with multiple exits. Though there are scenarios where the map will not spawn. So I added a failsafe. Basically, if the map takes longer than 10 seconds to spawn, it will restart. I could have done this from the start of fixing the map bugging, but I believe the way I did it allows for some more interesting and windy map generation. To finish things up, I added 3 more rooms, allowing for much more generation. I added an upper floor room, a basement room, and a Y hallway room. So now there's some more branches and some more interesting variation in the map. Now, this is all I did for this month. We started this month with a bland and immersion ruining map to this randomly generated and I'd say quite decent map. Next month, I will add better lighting as well as sound effects to build more atmosphere. I will also add more features to make the map interactive. If you enjoyed this devlog, consider liking and subscribing. I post daily gaming videos if you are interested in that, And if you guys are just here to see the game I'm making, the next devlog will be on October 6th. Have a good rest of your day. Bye, guys.